Wanted to see if I could get a video out here. It's a little bit windy, sunny, but it's also really pretty out. What snow remains. Anyway, about an interaction that I had just the other day in the grocery store with the checkout clerk, and what that tells us about our models of reality. At least this highlighted something for me. We just did the chit chat, and then this guy, as he was checking me out, he's like, "Oh yeah, and the other day I had this lady, and I was talking to her about something related to the universe, the Big Bang, or something like that." And she, she was just smiling and nodding, and then at the very end, she said, "Oh, that's all fine, but I don't really believe in evolution." And he rolled his eyes, and he's like, "Ah," and I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, that's interesting. I was a scientist and worked on the Human Genome Project," and he's like, "Oh, relief," and he had this instant thing of like, oh, a fellow person who shares my model of reality, of like the story that we've all been told, those of us who have been brought up believing in things like evolution and the Big Bang and so on. And I'm not about to go off on a rant and say that that's all bogus, but at the same time, it's incomplete. Those theories, like evolution, are incomplete. I mean, we know some basic things are going on. We know that this process of natural selection happens, and we know that things like random, or maybe not so random, mutations, somehow mutations get introduced into the process, and successful ones are selected, and unsuccessful ones are not. I mean, that's pretty well supported, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't know, such as, did some of this DNA arise on other planets, or did it start with RNA first and then go into DNA, or did it start with proteins? Could we have been seeded by another alien species onto this planet and then resumed evolution here? Could there have been any kind of intelligent design? I'm not talking about anytime you use words like that, they're loaded with, so like there was this whole intelligent design theory. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, how do we know there wasn't, again, an alien species that wanted to seed life onto Earth? I mean, they talk about things like that in Star Trek, but, why do we assume in this science that stuff's all impossible? There was a YouTube video I saw the other day, and I couldn't watch very much of it because it just made me angry. He was talking about, it's a guy named Anton who talks about a lot of different subjects in physics and biology, and he does a pretty good job, by and large, for somebody who's not, a professional, as far as I can tell, in it. And yet, he was talking about this paper that said, the probability of other intelligent life here in our universe of 10 to the 23rd stars. I mean, that's such a huge number. But even with that huge, just incomprehensible number, like I once calculated, you could count like 1 billion stars per minute or something like that, 1 billion stars per minute, and you would be counting for trillions and trillions of years. And that's what it would take to count all of those stars. Like 10 to the 23rd, it's incomprehensibly large. And yet, some people came along and made a fancy paper that said, well, based on, what we know, it's very unlikely that other life like us would evolve anywhere in a universe of 10 to the 23rd stars. Now, here's the problem with that. I mean, it's fine to do a computation if you're really honest about what you don't know. But the problem with our scientific models, and why this conversation got to me, is because there's this religious-like assumption when people talk about our scientific models, like evolution, that we have most of the basic stuff figured out. Big Bang, we have it mostly figured out. Our origins, we have it mostly figured out. There's this, it really is almost like a religious cult-like belief in these things as if they're true, as opposed to, oh, well, we know a few things, but certainly there's a lot we don't know. And like in this assumption that, oh, life, this was reported again on this video and in the paper as if like this is a serious computation that probably other life doesn't exist. Well, I mean, I've been seeing, and not only myself, but family members and their friends and many other people have been seeing these lights in our skies that we cannot explain. They are certainly not stars because they move, or they can stay in the same place all night relative to the Earth, which, that can't do. They flash, sometimes they move, sometimes they disappear, sometimes they come back. I mean, there's just all sorts of stuff, they aren't drones, certainly, because they have like this pulsing cross pattern. And I've actually seen these same objects on videos or not but videos that people on YouTube show. There's a guy, Mr. BBB, who receives videos from all sorts of people across the globe of weird phenomenon. And many people have shown videos of the same things I see in our skies. Could it be some secret military thing? That's one explanation. But why do we assume that it has to be that explanation as opposed to something else? So when some scientist comes along and dismisses all that and says, well, we know, we know, because we did some math based on whatever random assumptions that we made where we don't know what we don't know, but we made some random assumptions about what we don't know. And so we're going to show you that this is the truth. That is like a frickin' religion. That is where a religious priest comes along and is like telling you this is what you should believe, and we've got the fancy reasons for you to believe that. And in this case, with modern science, the fancy reasons are a bunch of fancy math that nobody understands except for maybe a few people who dig into it and are like, okay, well, I guess that sort of makes sense if I believe your assumptions. And since there's a kind of priesthood in mainstream science that they all kind of buy into the same basic tenets, they all agree, and so they propagate these beliefs. Now, this is not an anti-science video. The real point is, be careful who you listen to. Be careful that you're not just, if you're saying, well, religion doesn't have the answers, so instead, I'm going to replace these theories of creationism with, more validated theories like evolution. Okay, I'll grant you. That is more validated. We have more evidence that supports evolution, something like evolution, than we do creation. But that doesn't say that there's not something more nuanced actually going on in evolution, that there's not some big refinement or a lot of things we're actually missing about that process, because there are still a lot of mysteries. I mean, they get glossed over in the priesthood of science. They do get glossed over, and so people just act when they're talking about it as if that is the truth with a capital T, truth. And then lay people buy into it. This is science. Science knows this. Science has proven this. Science is factual. Well, science uses facts in certain ways that sometimes support its models and sometimes don't. So let's circle back around to how this might have to do with you or me, because I've been questioning everything. For a lot of my life, I've questioned everything, but especially recently, really questioning everything. And I think all of us should be questioning everything right now in this world with all of this stuff going on. We can look around and say, well, there's something really messed up. And the same guy who I talked to, he's like, well, I said something to him like, hey, well, I was in mainstream science, and while I agree with some basics of evolution, I think there's a lot missing. That's what I said. And he said, oh yeah, whenever humans are involved, we always screw it up, don't we? So there's another model that he just espoused that is also a model I've talked about in other videos of oh, we're just screwed up. We're just flawed. We're messed up. So of course we're going to mess it up. Instead of saying, maybe the real problem is that we have this model that we have to have either the religious model or the so-called scientific model, and this model all of these models, notice they have something in common. They take us and our subjective experience, our quality of life out of the picture. They take our own experiences out of the picture. They say, put your thinking and your experience into the hands of an authority. And if you only follow some right authority who knows the truth, again with a capital T, then you will be rewarded. You will be knowing. You will have clarity. You will find truth. Hasn't worked out for me. How's it been working for you? Like, it's kind of a ridiculous thing we've gotten into. Maybe that is the real problem. Maybe that is why so many people think we are broken. Not because we actually are broken, but because we have adopted this broken model of needing authorities to tell us what the truth is, rather than feeling empowered to find it ourselves. Rather than feeling empowered and shown how to think critically, be curious, be open-minded, accept new information when it comes along, and accept that there's probably a lot we don't know, and being okay with that. Like, why are we not okay? Why is our whole society on this thing of like, well, we have to know everything. We have to be like in control and know everything. There is so much we don't know. And it's just, once you accept that, like, it's such a relief. As I've started to accept that maybe there are levels of consciousness that in this body I will just never access, never see, where all sorts of things are going on that are amazing and wonderful, but it might be a long, from our time perspective, a long time before my consciousness gets to access those things or understand those things. Or, you know, it's like this, there are levels of truth that we can understand at different times in our evolution. And instead of trying to go after some fixed truth of things, which we all seem to do, and of course that fixed truth, again, being held by authorities, why not just understand that as we grow, as we develop, we learn more truth. We see things from new perspectives and new levels, and it's always this progressive, changing thing. Wow, that would really make life so much more satisfying for so many people, and we wouldn't have to sit there fighting other people for, I've got the truth and you are wrong, and then they're like, no, you're wrong and here's the truth, and everybody's like, no, you're wrong and here's the data and here are the equations. No, you're wrong, this is like the word of God, it's in the Bible. No, you're wrong, blah 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 blah. And I mean, it's like a never-ending chain of BS going back and forth that just, for everyday people, it does not make our lives better. Really, when was the last time when you debated something like that it made your life better? What if instead we could just get together and talk about our experiences and how those might fit together into some puzzle and be curious and open-minded? Wow, wouldn't that be a change? And that's what the purpose of this video is really about. Why I stopped skiing and made this recording. So I hope that helps you, like, think about, like, oh, again, have I bought into this idea of authorities who tell me the truth, whether they're scientific or religious or whatever? Have I bought into that? And what if I let go of that and did my own personal experimentation, my own personal sort of scientific process of just discovering what I think my truth is? And that's certainly what I've been doing here and what I'm sharing some of in these videos, and I'll keep sharing them. But I'm encouraging you to also undertake that process yourself. But it requires dropping this idea that there's some authority out there that like knows all of the stuff. There is not. I've been part of science and I've advised scientists and still advise scientists and consult with scientists on a regular basis. They do not have the truth. They have little pieces of truth. And a lot of them are awesome people, so please don't take this as that I'm like telling you that all scientists are bad. No, I think for some, not all, but for some, it goes to their head because our society puts them on an altar, just like we do priests. And so it goes to their head and they just get a little bit out too far afield from what they actually know and can speak on for real. So if you enjoy videos like this, please give me a like and subscribe. I don't want to sound like I'm begging. That's kind of like begging. No. But it is really helpful to get this out there and to keep me motivated to keep doing this work. And also, what's your experience? What is your experience with the religion of religion and the religion of science and any other kinds of religions that might be out there that I haven't thought of in this video? And I'm going to get back to skiing because I'm getting a little bit cold. All right, I'll see you later.